Next from Naperville, Governor Rauner is joined by Representative Grant Worley and State Senator Michael Connelly as the governor signs a bill that will prevent the so-called double dipping of pensions by law enforcement officers. Later, Governor Rauner takes questions on his recent firings of members of his communications staff and the ongoing legislative battle over the school funding formula reform. This runs about 25 minutes.
Stick around after this event and enjoy all the opportunities for shopping and dining that downtown Naperville provides. Our local economy could certainly use the bump. HB 418 is a pension bill that starts to address our ever-growing pension liabilities. Anyone that follows state finances and state politics understands the effect of the ever-growing pension liabilities in our state. Depending on who you listen to, it's either $130 billion of unfunded pension liabilities or $250 billion, up to $250 billion of unfunded pension liabilities. So as those liabilities are growing, local units of government are seeing those dollars that should be allocated for other services going to fund pensions. That's crowding out things like teachers, first responders, salt for roads. So basic essential services are under increasing pressure to fund these pensions. Also, the taxpayers are under an ever-growing financial obligation to fund these pensions. So what HB 418 does is it stops the practice of what's commonly referred to as double dipping. Up until this bill is signed, a police officer could retire on a Friday, start a new job as a chief of police on a Monday, collect the pension, and then start working on a second pension. That has long-term financial implications that simply aren't sustainable, and this bill goes a long way to address it. I would like to point out that this bill in committee had bipartisan support. On the House floor, it received an almost unanimous vote and bipartisan support. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police for their support. They understand the pension crisis, and they were willing to come to the table and come up with a solution to a problem that impacts us all. In the Senate, the bill was picked up by my friend and colleague, who also represents Naperville. That's Senator Mike Connelly. Senator Connelly. I would be remiss if I didn't introduce Representative Mark Batnick. Representative covers southern portion of Naperville, and Representative Keith Wheeler is joining us here today, also advocates for pension reform. So with that, Senator Mike Connelly.
Thank you, Representative, and thank you, Mayor, for hosting this. Grant and I are both from large families, so when Grant said I've got a few brief remarks, that was as brief as Grant can be. Yeah, today is an interesting day. You can't win the World Series with a grand slam. Sometimes you have to get a single and a double and a sacrifice bunt and a sacrifice fly. 4 years ago, a large bipartisan group of legislators passed comprehensive pension reform, and the Supreme Court found it unconstitutional unanimously. So what we're left with, we have to find ways to navigate the Supreme Court, navigate the Constitution of the state of Illinois to really start chopping away at the long-term liabilities, and that's what this bill does. I was thrilled when Grant said, I want you to pick this up. I see people from the Naperville Area Chamber of Commerce who've been championing pension reform for at least a decade now, and it's constitutional and it's incremental, but it's an important first step. So with that, I want to introduce a person who's also been a champion of pension reform long before he ever got into this world of politics, our Governor, Bruce Rauner.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be back in Naperville. This is one of the best-run communities in the entire state of Illinois. You have been strong advocates for reform, for helping our taxpayers, for properly funding our schools, for creating more economic opportunity for everyone. I'd specifically like to thank the mayor, members of the city council here. Thank you for your leadership and your service. I appreciate you very much. This is an important bill. It's a step in the right direction, a very strong, positive step in the right direction. We want to protect our pension benefits. Protect our benefits, make sure they are there in full for folks when they retire. But we also want to make sure that the system is fair for taxpayers and is sustainable in the long run. We have to have a balance. Protect the benefits, protect taxpayers, and keep fairness in the system. The practice of double dipping was never the original intent of the law. It was never the original intent of our pension system. Collecting a pension, retiring, collecting a pension, and then immediately going back into the same service and earning a salary while taking a pension was never the intent. It's really not fair to many of the retirees who aren't doing that. It's not fair to taxpayers. And in the long run, it deprives money from both the pension system, so it can stay sustainable, but it takes money away from other critical services in our communities. It takes money away from public safety. It takes money away from our education system. It takes money away from social services and human services, the help, the money for our most vulnerable. It also takes money away from the pockets of taxpayers at a higher degree, and that takes away jobs from our economy. Hurts our small business owners who are creating jobs for the people of Illinois. So this bill is a good bill. It's a step in the right direction. It passed with strong bipartisan support. Strong bipartisan support. I'd like to thank the members of the General Assembly, Senator Connelly, and our representatives who are here. Thank you for your leadership. Appreciate you very much. On behalf of all the people of Illinois, this is a good day, and I look forward to signing this bill. Thank you. Take any on-topic questions about pension reform or other issues, and while the leaders are here from the General Assembly, and after that I'll let them go aside and we can talk about other topics, other issues that folks would like to address. Any questions about this bill? Or?
What does this do for those people who are already collecting a few pensions or more pensions?
That continues. This is prospective.
Correct.
What is the relief that this bill offers? I mean, we know what the problem is. Does this prohibit them from taking the job?
No. They just don't start collecting the pension. They can take another job. That's terrific, but the pension doesn't start getting paid until they're retired.
Do they start earning another pension even though they're not collecting on the first?
My understanding is yes.
So what happens is
there's a
they can
401.
collect Under this new law, the retired police officer can continue to collect that pension, but when they take a new job in law enforcement, they can now no longer get a defined benefit. They can get a defined contribution plan. So it takes away the double dipping from a pension standpoint, but it leaves open the ability for that law enforcement officer to negotiate with that community, because during this process we did hear from some of the smaller downstate communities that they like to hire these retired law enforcement officers. So it does allow them to sort of strike their own deal for a defined contribution plan and not a defined benefit plan for the second pension.
So they can or cannot get a second pension?
They can get a 401k style pension, retirement plan, but it simply removes the option of a defined benefit plan for a second pension. It leaves it up to that local unit of government to negotiate directly with that new chief of police the terms of the retirement plan that they want to put together. From a financial standpoint, it provides budgeting and certainty for that local unit of government. They know their costs. On the upfront basis, they can plan for it and finance that retirement plan instead of the defined benefit plans. Units of government have a hard time coming up with what the actuaries say and how much they need to put in. So this allows a solid tool for budgeting on a go-forward basis.
But they cannot collect the pension if they go back to work. They cannot collect.
So this, because of the ruling that the senator spoke of from the Illinois Supreme Court, we were not able to do that. So we can't diminish their pension that they've already earned, so they will continue to collect that. It just prohibits them from earning a second pension in a job. They're still in the same career. These chiefs still carry guns. They still have arrest powers. To me, they're still in active law enforcement.
Is there anything similar to other public employees, or is this just limited to police? What about teachers and other public employees?
Great question. Right now, this is just limited to chiefs of police. But this is a template on how we can do things on a go-forward basis, so I look forward to introducing similar language for other public service employees.
Questions on other topics?
Governor, who approved the statement that was put out that has caused so much angst for you? Did you see it? Did you approve it? And if you did not, who did? And why are they still perhaps working for your staff?
You're referring to an email that went out on Tuesday,
Yes.
midday.
The white mail statement.
That email was sent with, I did not have knowledge of it. I did not approve it. And I, along with our senior staff, put out a subsequent statement to clarify.
Who did approve it?
Well, it went out from our senior communications staff. I believe it was drafted by Diana Rickard and sent out under email from Laurel Patrick.
Did your chief of staff approve it? Because we understand that that would be normal procedure.
She did not.
Governor, why are you shaking of your head again?
There are some changes in our communications team. There are 4 folks who are not with us going forward. And we put out a statement to that effect this morning. By mutual agreement, they're good folks doing good work, and I appreciate their efforts on behalf of the people of Illinois. Our efforts are never-ending to try to have the best team of people possible to serve the best interests of all the people of Illinois, and we are constantly trying to build the team. I'm sorry? Yes, we've announced some changes in the communications department, and that's all the changes there are.
Governor, what is your position on the IPI cartoon?
I have seen it now. I understand why some people would be upset by it. I hope we can together as a society, together as the people of Illinois, together as all Americans, that we can work to find common ground, work for justice, fairness, equality. And I'll say very strongly, that's one of the primary reasons I ran for governor. We have not had a fair system, a just system in Illinois for years. Why in Illinois have we tolerated for years the highest unemployment rate for African Americans? Why should we ever accept that? Why in Illinois for years have we had the worst funding for schools from a state government that has resulted in the largest gap between what low-income students receive per student, and most of those are minority students, and what high-income students receive in their schools per student? This system has been in existence for decades in Illinois. Many have tried to change it. We are succeeding. I believe we are on the verge of an exciting new day for the people of Illinois with a much more fair, just education system that has more equality in it. I am cautiously optimistic. I'm excited. The General Assembly is negotiating to try to come up with a good solution and compromise that embraces the new school funding formula that I support and that came out of our bipartisan commission. But again, these are stressful times. There is so much hostile rhetoric. There is so much pent-up emotion. And what I think is in everyone's interest is for us to come together, find unity, find common ground, work together, respect each other, listen, and work for justice, fairness, and equality. These are the principles that America's been built on, and we should work together to try to achieve that.
Governor, do you think that cartoon is racist?
I understand why some people are upset by it. And
Are you upset by it, sir?
I understand why some people are upset by it. My job is not to comment on every cartoon, every political statement that comes from outside our administration, and I will not do that. What I will do is fight every day for justice, fairness, equality, and we today are on the verge of historic change, both for economic opportunity as well as education fairness. And that's what we're fighting for.
This isn't every cartoon. This is the only policy institute that you have leaned on heavily for your staff overhaul until the new overhaul. But this isn't their first cartoon that has been viewed as racist by some. This is about the 10th cartoon. So that's why it's not just any cartoon.
As I said,
Continue to lean on the Illinois Policy Institute as your go-to think tank.
I have not leaned on them as my go-to think tank. That is not an accurate statement. I challenge the premise of the question. And I do have a few folks in our administration who used to work there. We have Democrats in our administration, we have Republicans, we have people from all walks of life and all backgrounds. A very tiny fraction of our administration is from that organization, and they in no regard, does that organization speak for me or our administration, and I do not lean on them for any particular issue or policy.
Governor, you talk about inequality in education. The cartoon, of course, speaks to that. It talks about, it has the white, fat guy with the cigar, he's hiding tip money. So that message, do you agree with the principle of that message, and was it appropriate to deliver that message with a black kid begging a fat white guy for money?
Here's the issue that I have been talking about for years, and is part of my amendatory veto of the education funding bill. We have a TIF system, a use of TIF districts, particularly in the city of Chicago, that is excessive. It is beyond anything that's reasonable. The Chicago Teachers Union has criticized it extensively for years. I agree with the Chicago Teachers Union on their views. The TIF districts take a significant amount of money, in the case of Chicago, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars every year, away from property taxes that would otherwise fund schools. And unfortunately, not only does it hurt children in Chicago, majority of whom are minorities, African American, Latino, English language learners, other immigrants, majority are disadvantaged students. It takes money away from them and creates funds that are used for other purposes. And again, there are reasons why TIF districts exist, and Chicago is not the only community in the state that uses them. But Chicago uses them at a pace that is 5 times more than the rest of the state. And that deprives money from our disadvantaged students, takes money away from the teachers in the classroom. And if that's a choice of the people of Chicago that they've made through their elected representatives, so be it. We need to respect that, local control. But we've set up an education funding system where the rest of state's taxpayers, suburbs, downstate, under the education funding formula, are forced to subsidize that decision. That's unfair, and that's what I exposed through my mandatory veto. We can see how unfair the system and how broken it is, how much money has been subsidized into Chicago from the suburbs and downstate. And again, I do not want to take money away from Chicago. I'm trying to get more money for Chicago. I've been an advocate for Chicago Public Schools improvement for more than 25 years. I have chaired or been on the board of virtually every reform organization for education in Chicago, and my wife and I have put our resources, time, and other resources into helping teachers, training, development, principal development, scholarships for low-income kids in Chicago, early childhood education for disadvantaged students in Chicago. I care deeply about Chicago, and I want to get more money for Chicago. The new funding formula does that. But we've got to deal with, and I hope we can find compromise, is a system where money is diverted from classrooms in the suburbs and downstate into Chicago's financial structure, which is broken.
So you agree
Yes.
Emanuel challenges you on the TIF issue. He says that schools and libraries are the biggest beneficiaries in the city of TIF money. That's how they built new schools and libraries.
So if you read, I encourage you to read the statements that have been put out by the Chicago Teachers Union on TIFs and TIF money. I encourage you to analyze my mandatory veto and the financial impact of that. And you can go to illinois.gov/gov, illinois.gov/gov. All I did with my mandatory veto, primarily what I did, there's some other minor tweaks, but primarily did was have all school districts treated the same when it comes to TIF and PTEL and how the schools are funded. Just treat everybody the same. And when you can see the result, when that happens, and the money that would otherwise be diverted flows through the new funding formula, you can see where the money flows. Aurora and Rockford and Maywood and Harvey and Elgin and Joliet, communities that have high poverty. Frankly, many of those communities have higher concentrations of poverty, higher concentrations of minority students than Chicago does. And they receive millions of dollars or more as a result of my mandatory veto because they don't have extensive TIF districts that are funded at 5 times the level of Chicago. And you can see those results. The facts speak for themselves. Yes, yes.
This is the second time this summer that we've seen a major shakeup of your staff, especially in your communications department. What is it about the communications department for you that is so...
Well, that's a great question. So the work that we do for the people of Illinois is incredibly difficult and very stressful. It's a burnout, high stress. It's hard on people's families. It's hard on anybody's life outside of public service. It's brutal. Now I volunteered for this, and I'm all committed to this. But as I say in many of my speeches, when I started this, I was 6'8" and had a full head of hair. I mean, this is really, really hard. But it's a noble mission. This is home. This is home, and we're all fighting to improve the future for our children and our grandchildren in our home. I am passionately dedicated to that. More economic opportunity, more education quality and equality. The communications effort is incredibly hard because we have attacks. We have political attacks coming 20 times a day. We have social media attacks coming 100 times a day. We have false rumors planted that have to be dealt with or responded to. We have legitimate questions from the media that deserve prompt turnaround and answering the questions to the best of our ability. It is really hard, really hard. And we need to do all that while also getting out the message about the positive changes that we're trying to drive and the wonderful work that we're doing on a bipartisan basis. Wonderful legislation that we've been able to achieve. More than 100,000 jobs that we've added since I became governor. The criminal justice transformation that we've achieved for Illinois. Illinois is #1 in transforming to the betterment of our criminal justice system, focusing on rehabilitation and drug addiction recovery and life skills so that we don't have repeat offenders. We are transforming Illinois for the better, getting that message out while we've got the noise and the attacks and the false rumors. It's really hard. And getting people who can do it well and are willing to do it on the scale, it's a challenge. And we will always work to try to have the best team we can possibly have to serve the people of Illinois. We'll never give up on that. It's just a process. And we'll always work to just have great people who are willing to do it. And putting the best interest of the people of Illinois above all else. Because sometimes other things get in the way, or other loyalties get in the way, or other relationships, or other groups. Nothing should matter inside government for public service. Nothing should matter except moving forward to help create a better life for the people of Illinois. That should be the loyalty. Yes, sir.
Do you worry that all of this turmoil within your administration could undermine your leadership and hurt your ability to actually work out a compromise on SB1? Or do you fear there could be Republicans who are looking at your administration and would bail on you and would support that override?
Well, let's say a couple things. First, I disagree with the characterization of turmoil. Change comes as part of any organization. We've had some folks with us since before I became governor. Some folks joined us in the first couple months and have been there since. Other folks have moved back into the private sector at various points over the last 2.5 years. It's just part of the process. I don't agree with turmoil. We've had some changes. A handful of people change. That's part of a process. Again, dedication to public service, dedication to putting the best interest of the people of Illinois first is what's paramount. That's where the loyalty needs to be. That's where our focus needs to be. In terms of SB1, I am cautiously optimistic that the General Assembly is coming together to find a bipartisan compromise. Obviously, my hope and recommendation is that they would just support my mandatory veto. But as I've said, I'm open to any other ideas, any compromise, and any issue can be on the table. I believe the 4 leaders are meeting again this afternoon. That's my understanding. I've been in contact with leaders in the General Assembly and members in the General Assembly virtually every day for weeks. My only real disappointment and frustration is Speaker Madigan and his caucus held the education bill for 2 months, just sat on it, wouldn't deal with it, wouldn't send it to my desk, quietly sat on it, to wait till now to deal with this, to create a crisis. And that's not fair to our teachers or our school children.
Governor, to be fair, you made it a point that your effort is to bring in the best people. And
Yeah.
yet after you lost with the budget veto override, there was a bunch of people who were gone. This whole cartoon issue that has created turmoil for your administration, we have a bunch of people gone. Does that undermine your leadership, and are Republicans going to perhaps bail on you on the SB1?
I have tremendous confidence that members of the General Assembly will do what's right, put the best interest of our students first, get a system that is more just and fair and emphasizing quality. I am very proud of the members of the General Assembly who are trying to negotiate in good faith. Again, I will express my disappointment and frustration in Speaker Madigan and his management of his caucus and how he has held this school budgeting process, basically held it hostage for several months. Again, I would challenge the Speaker for his management of the budgeting process, forcing a tax hike, breaking the General Assembly to force a tax hike with no reforms whatsoever, and passing a budget that is still not balanced, still running deficits, and with no appropriations to pay down debt. No problem got fixed. In fact, the problem is worse. And it's essential we don't allow that to happen to our schools and our teachers and our students. Our students deserve better than that. I hope the members of the General Assembly will come together, bipartisanship. I hope they'll do it today. Come up with a compromise. What I believe is that the General Assembly will come to a good bipartisan compromise that's in the best interest of our students and narrow the gap between what low-income students receive, so we have education, equality, justice, and fairness in a system that is sustainable for the long run and fair for taxpayers. Thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate it.